Coogs House. The Houston Cougars are back in action on the gridiron this weekend, and they kind of have a lot to play for, but it's also kind of a new opponent. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. We're doing the conversation, but don't know what to say. Tell us in the comments down below what your favorite type of pen is. I'm sitting here with a fine point glorified permanent marker, a little frustrated by it. So tell me what your favorite type of pen is. Comment down below. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. More on that fun later. Got a lot of things going on today, so I want to make sure we have time to get into it all. I want to talk some at the end of the show about time being kind of like a flat circle. That might make more sense later. I want to talk about Houston's path to victory this week in football, kind of out some outlines and stuff. Nice thing with the bye week is I got to watch a little bit more, condensed games still, but more stuff on the Arizona, like you want to say Cardinals, Arizona Wildcats. But first and foremost, I want to talk about that opponent of Houston's this weekend, the Arizona Wildcats. Again, I'm going to say Wildcats a bunch, but bear with me for the times that I say Cardinals by mistake. It's the same. It's the same math. I don't know, but they're both Arizona. So in this game, I want to stress that Arizona came into the year very, very highly touted. Most people had them as a preseason top 5 team in the Big 12. I even saw some people kind of on the West Coast that knew a lot more about them, kind of had them as a dark horse to maybe win the conference. Kind of shocking in that sense when you look at them now. Currently, Arizona is sitting at 3-6. Not the most stellar of resumes, to say the least. Their 3 wins are Utah, because as Houston knows, Utah is a very beatable team. Northern Arizona by just 12 points, which is not what you would think. And then New Mexico. That's the 3 wins. I was just that Arizona was also ranked in the top 25 to start the year. Spent 3 weeks ranked themselves. Lost that ranking after their blowout loss to Kansas State in week 3. Haven't gotten it back since. So as we look at this team, I think a lot of the preseason hoopla and all that was about building on stuff from last year, but on the combination of Noah Fifita and wideout Tetairoa McMillan. Now, I may be mispronouncing Tetairoa McMillan. I'm probably just going to say McMillan the rest of the way. But Noah Fifita and him had like this great connection and building things, and it looked intimidating to a lot of teams. And Fifita, I don't think, has had the kind of growth that they anticipated on the season. He's got 61, just over 61% completions this year. He's got 14 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, which is not great to say the least. And honestly, I think people kind of anticipated being a little cleaner with the ball this year. He does have over 2,300 yards. But again, those 10 picks kind of weigh down any accolades you want to put on the yardage or even the completion percentage. The other thing I think is interesting about him is that he's only got 1 rushing touchdown. And the first game I saw, he's doing a lot of great movement in the pocket. But it doesn't look like he does a whole lot of movement downfield as far as being a 2-threat guy. The other thing that's really hurting him, though, so we mentioned Tetairoa McMillan, who is the real deal, 6'5", 215. As far as his own stats go, he's going to be up at about 1,000 yards already this season, 6 touchdowns. And that is all to say that he's the real deal. He's probably a first 2-round draft pick. He's target numero uno. He's got 1,000 yards. The next highest receiver in terms of yardage for Arizona is Kevin Burnett at 217 yards. Dramatic drop off across the board after that, right? And frankly, the big weapon that Fifita has, the quarterback, is he's got a really strong arm, but his wide receivers outside of McMillan are just unable to create separation. It's very glaring in every film you watch, every game you watch. They can't get away from DBs, and I would argue they can't get away from DBs that are far worse than the ones that Houston's trotting out. Houston has an advantage in coverage. I'd probably bracket McMillan on most passing downs, and outside of that, I'd feel pretty comfortable with any one of Houston's DBs in one-on-one with any one of these other receivers. And truthfully, in the right spots, I think we can go one-on-one with McMillan too, but I wouldn't, because there's just such a big discrepancy there, I wouldn't focus too much on that. They had some success running the football. The trick has been that they get down early and can't run the football as often as you like because it wastes a lot of clock, right? Quali Conley, one of the running backs, is a good-sized kid. Nothing. The other guy's bigger. I'll get to him in a second. But Conley's got 7 touchdowns in the year, which again for a team that's kind of typically playing from behind, it's a decent amount of rushing touchdowns for sure. No one else in the roster has more than one. And I think that kind of indicative of what their run game has looked like this season. They've lost 5 in a row. They got a lot of stuff going on there. The last game was an embarrassing 56-12 loss to UCF. They got beat by BYU 41-19 a few weeks back. I look at those two as games to kind of keep an eye on, with results translating to this weekend, because BYU and Houston both lead with their defense, right? And so BYU winning 41-19 indicates to me that, okay, things were, the defensive mindset of the game worked. They grind out the clock. Obviously, BYU scored some points, but that's the way that goes. UCF, 56 points, and they like to run the football. They have a running quarterback that ran out for a large stretch of that game. We'll talk more about specifics in the Houston's path section in a moment, but both of those indicate good things to me. I want to look at what offenses have had success against the Arizona defense with. I'm encouraged for Houston's sake. Sorry, I got Austin as a name. One of their DBs pulled up here. I think that if you look at what Houston does, a lot of run game stuff. Arizona's been really bad at those B gap area off tackle, inside tackle runs, especially if you get a puller involved. Houston does a lot more of the pulling and fold stuff inside the guards, but it wouldn't be a gigantic game changing kind of thing to get outside the guard with that one. Houston has struggled to pass the ball, and I'll say that to put it lightly. I wonder if Arizona's got enough deficiencies in the back half of their defense, though, that you kind of almost feel like you have to. It feels like every game you watch, whether it's Central Florida and their run hit game, or Utah and their freshman quarterback, or whomever, Arizona's getting beat deep. It just, if you can hold up long enough to get the ball off, and doesn't even have to be that long, Arizona is getting beat deep. Some of that's bad luck on jump balls, I guess, but at this point, we're in mid-November. If you're getting beat on jump balls, it might just be who you are, right? And I know Houston's not a team that is passing the ball a whole lot, right? Zion Chris was like 11 for 11 the other day, but that deep stuff's going to be there. So I think when you get down inside the 30-yard line, look for things like you saw Joseph Manchek catch he ran a skinny, just a quick slant, kind of like skinny and then up, or skinny and then over, I should say. And the two guys inside of him ran fades to take off the safeties. Things like that will be open. The things like the Boogie Johnson wheel route to get a touchdown a couple weeks ago will be open, so long as Houston throws the ball. And that's things that are on the table for Houston. And looking at what Arizona does, I want to talk about what that path could look like. But I think that there's a lot of good things here for Houston as we look at Arizona. But before we get too far, I want to tell you about our buddies over at Roy Return on You. It's a fun one to get involved in. I really hope the entire listening base gets involved in this one, because you can now download the Roy app and get involved in the NIL scene. You've heard us talk about Roy before and throughout the season and how they're kind of revolutionizing NIL. Roy allows you to get involved and get a say in who gets that NIL money. Here's what I like about Roy is you can get your money back if the player transfers out or whatever, right? So like when the Exodus guys last year, Roy would not have been a problem. Roy is helping us keep the team intact and actually good for the game long term because they have to stay to keep that NIL money. That's part of the performance here. You can show your support for whomever. This weekend, I went with Milos Uzan on the basketball team as my Roy Player of the Week. That means we're going to be sending him $100 to his NIL account through Roy. If you want to give him something, maybe find some money for J1 or find somebody on the football team, whoever. They have football, men's basketball, and women's basketball all up and active. Go download the Roy app and see what the logo looks like on the screen right now if you're watching on YouTube. If you're looking for anywhere online and you have your phone or whatever, go to joinroy.com, joinroy.com. Again, I gave Moses on the player of the week because I thought the plus 14 and a 5-point loss was an impressive stat on its own. He also had double-digit points, and had he not fouled out, you could argue that he probably would have gotten there in assists. I also think that him fouling out made such a dramatic difference in the game. It's hard to argue that they would have lost the game had he been able to play the whole time, right? So I gave it to Milos. Tell me in the comments down below if you got someone you want to give it to. We're gonna give him $100 in his NIL account on Roy. Download the app today or go to joinroy.com. Use promo code Locked On. Every athlete from all these college football teams, men's basketball and women's basketball, are all on there. No purchase necessary, void or prohibited. Go to joinroy.com for full terms. Roy supports players, change the game. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Cougs here, breaking down the upcoming matchup coming off of a bye week for Houston and Arizona. Hot take, this game being at 9:15 Texas time on a Friday night is too late to kick one off on a weekday that I've been up working all day, but that's neither here nor there. I'll be taking a 5 energy shot, also a partner, but that's not one of today's sponsors, during the day on that one, I'm sure. But I want to talk in this segment some about Houston's path to victory in this game, because as I was watching condensed games, admittedly, but condensed games of Arizona having some real struggles here, right? They've lost 5 in a row. They had their own bye week, but going into the bye week, they had a pretty embarrassing loss, 56-12. I think that there's a number of different things here that Houston can excel at and take advantage of, and that outlines the path to winning this game. For example, based on where teams have had success running the ball against Arizona, and I would stress that teams are having success running the ball against Arizona. The defense giving up 170 rushing yards per game, about 2 rushing touchdowns per game. And this is in the high-flying Big 12. Now, I know it's not really the high-flying Big 12 anymore, but this really is. That's a lot. For an average, that's a lot. And I think the way that they give up runs, you'll see a lot of Rashawn Sanford, a lot of DJ Butler, maybe Stacey Sneed too. But that B gap area is not necessarily where Jamarian Burnett's going to be super successful always. And then, frankly, it's also not necessarily where I'd run Zeon Chris necessarily either. I see him as more of a buck sweep kind of guy, getting out to the edge kind of guy. And so I think you're going to see a lot of Sanford, a lot of Butler, a lot of Sneed, inside, outside. You attack the tackle's butt cheek and you see kind of which side he turns it to. He's going to face the guy out, you cut inside, face the guy in, you cut outside, right? That kind of stuff. I think they're going to bring pullers involved. I mentioned it earlier in the show that a lot of the time Houston runs puller kind of stuff as opposed to split zone kind of stuff. They're looking to get inside the A gaps. I don't think it'd be a horribly big adjustment to kind of just bump that over based on the defense's alignment and have some success running into those naturally created pockets in the 4-2-5 the way they're running it. I think you also got to run the ball to keep Fifita and McMillan off the field. Coming off a bye week, they've got 2 home games left, this one and then Arizona State to end the year. Got to imagine Noah Fifita and Tetairoa McMillan are really going to be trying to right the ship. They win all 3. I guess they are also bowl eligible. And really try to, turn their season around before I imagine at least McMillan's a pro, right? If you run the ball again, Sanford, Butler, Sneed, even if it's the 35, 40 times, you're keeping them off the field. I say 35 or 40 times, though, because My third bullet point here, 1, 2, 3, for the offense is that they've really got to time those shots and take shots well. I'm not saying throw it 40 times. I'm not saying throw it 30 times, but the 15 to 20 range with maybe 6 or 8 of them being real shots. Arizona gives up the deep ball. They just do. And Houston's got receivers that can beat these guys. And I understand that protection and quarterback play and other factors have led to Houston not necessarily using a great room in their offense. You talk about rooms because that's where you sit around and watch film right together. But the receiver room for Houston is really, really strong. Like I don't think that Arizona's going to deal with Boogie's speed very well, or Makai Muse's speed very well, or Joseph Manjak's speed very well, or any of these guys, right? And I think that the speed will be important, and I don't see how they stay in front of Houston if Houston really tries to air it out, and especially if Houston's having success running the ball and is pulling the safeties in towards the box. Houston's going to be behind them a lot in the pass game if they want to be. And I understand that the recipe for this team has been to be diligent in the run game, trust it, beat them down with it, break the ones late. The Zion Chris 41-yarder a couple of weeks ago being the biggest piece of evidence there, right? But in this one, the shots are going to be there so vividly, you got to take a couple. I'm not saying take 50. You got to take a couple, and I think that the timing of those will be interesting. When do you gasp, pass the ball on second down? Oh my goodness, right? Like what kind of a thing do you do to kind of manufacture those a little bit? Because if you get the ball in the air, you're going to be behind the defense a lot. As far as Houston's defense goes in this path to victory, honestly, it's just not falling back. We saw last time Houston had a bye week, they beat TCU, had a great defensive performance, and then came out against Kansas, and it was the worst game the defense has played all year. Period. Full stop. And I just worry that coming off of a bye week, you had momentum from winning 2 in a row. Defense looked incredible in both of those. Do you lose some momentum coming off of a bye week into a week where you're playing a short week because you play on Friday night? So it's like weirdly a long week with the bye week, but a short week because of right? That's odd. Is the defense ready to go? I think that's the first and foremost thing, right? Because truthfully, as much as we want to belabor how bad the offense was against Kansas, this team was averaging about 2 touchdowns a game, really a touchdown and 2 field goals a game. They gave you 2 touchdowns against Kansas. I mean, that's been good enough in the win a lot of the time, right? And so the giving up of 49 was unacceptable in that one. I mean, you could say scoring more than 14 would be nice too, but in this one, the defense needs to be ready to go. The other thing is, I know he hadn't had the most success on the team to date, but Kendrick Riscano is their bigger back. He's more like the 230-pound looking kind of guy. I actually don't know his height and weight is listed, but he's a big old kid. And I kind of wonder if he's the guy Houston's going to have more trouble with in terms of their running back, in terms of them running the ball. I know that Quali Conley, as I mentioned earlier, has basically all the touchdowns, and he has 570 yards to Riscano's 265. But Riscano was just built in a way that in the last several years, Houston's had trouble with backs that are built like that. And I worry that we're kind of the coming out party for him. I will say that's a largely personnel thing, and the defense has so many guys that transferred in the last 2 years that might be just like my own, I don't know, a bad taste in my mouth from years of bad defense. But as I look at this year's team, playing the run game is important. Knowing where McMillan is every time, every snap is important. But truthfully, these receivers don't intimidate me. The offensive line is not terrible, but they're not a bunch of road graders. Fifita's arm is incredibly strong. But as you can see in his 10 interceptions through 9 games, he will cough it up. And frankly, part of the reason he coughs it up is because, as said McMillan, his receivers don't get any separation. So all that is to say that if you can kind of keep the run game in check and you're show up ready to play, unlike you did last bye week, I don't think Houston's defense needs to do anything extraordinarily different than they've done all year long. Now, that is to play excellently because the defense, even in every game, basically, but Cincinnati and even parts of that weren't terrible. But basically, besides the Kansas game, I'd stress that this has been a great defense all year long, one of the best in recent memory. So playing at that level is obviously challenging, but they just got to be themselves and play at that level. And I think they'll be okay defensively in this one. I do think it's going to be a low scoring game. That's part of the path as well as keeping it low scoring because Houston's offense is going to take some time to get in rhythm. Running the ball as much as we do is only going to score a few times at most anyway. And, we're not breaking off 80-yard runs. It's more like 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, right? And so that is all to say that we'll investigate this more throughout the week. Also got a couple of basketball games to talk about and our book club and stuff like that. So we got a lot of stuff coming in this week. But that is all to say that we'll be previewing this throughout the week, work on getting a crossover done. You get to hear a little bit more of the Arizona perspective and those kind of things. Before we get too terribly far, remind you about today's buddies, FanDuel. Right, remember, FanDuel is bringing today's episode, and FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook for all kinds of good reasons, including that right now, if you put down a $5 bet, get $150 back in bonus bets if that bet wins. They got Houston as a 2.5-point underdog in this one, and I'm telling you, I don't know that you guys do anything besides show up and beat themselves and like not play like that against Kansas, and they should win this game. And so I think that could make it very, very interesting. The fact that Houston's 2.5-point underdog, but whatever kind of interesting you want to make it, visit FanDuel.com to do so. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Parker Ainsworth hosts a Locked On Cougs. Are breaking down Houston and Arizona this weekend. To come off the bye week, kind of getting our head wrapped around what kinds of things are on the table for this weekend. And in doing research for this game, I always go to Wins PD when I'm looking at like an opponent we hadn't played in a couple years or something like that, and just seeing what the series is at and what things look like, and is there any historical trend to look at? And I don't know that I put together this is only the 5th time Houston and Arizona have played one another. Houston leads the all-time series at this point, 3-1. Houston won in both 2017 and 18. They lost in 1986 and won in 1969. I want to talk some about the 2017 game for a second because it feels like this is again maybe being a history teacher by day. It's one of my many jobs. But it feels like time's a flat circle here, and by that I mean then 2017, it was the game to open the season, I should say. So it was much earlier in the year. It was Kyle Allen's first game as a Coug. Remember that? Remember that once upon a time? That was when Kyle Allen played for Houston Cougars. Yeah, he was an Aggie transfer, and admittedly, I don't know. I was excited. Texas A&M was an SEC school at that point. He was a highly touted recruit before he got there. It felt like a good shot. Because of the transfer rules at that point, he played for Houston for one whole year, right? He came in this game and didn't exactly light the world on fire. He had 225 yards and a touchdown, but also 2 interceptions, including one almost costly one late in that game. Truthfully, the running backs, Dylan Burden and Duke Catalan, had a lot more of the heavy lifting. If I'm not refreshing your memory yet, I had to go make sure I had the name of the kid right, but they had a long kickoff return that was, I thought it was a touchdown, but it looks like it was almost a touchdown. Set up a couple plays later, a rushing touchdown by John Leday. All this happened in Arizona in 2017, right? That's an Ed Oliver year. He had 11 tackles. I think that the bad snap I think that was Ed Oliver's safety. I couldn't figure out based on the box score who got credit for that. But if I remember correctly, it was a kind of safety where you just touch the guy because he's already on the ground and get the credit for it. Bad snap, handoff kind of situation, if I remember correctly. The box score did remind me that Garrett Davis also had the game-sealing or dagger or interception with a couple minutes to go in that one. Great time to be a Coug back then. It was a fun roster of talent. Also, and this year's team has fun roster of talent. That's not necessarily why I think time's a flat circle. That was a real transitional point for the Houston Cougars. You had just lost Tom Herman And that debacle the offseason before, it was the Major Applewhite show. For better or for worse, with the Major Applewhite show. And Houston opens the 2017 season with a road Power 5 victory. And while Arizona wasn't great the year before or whatever, like that felt really good. I cannot stress how watching Houston beat Arizona and start 2017, we lost Tom Herman. We got this new kid coming in. It's a people in my circles were calling him a fallback from A&M, right, or whatever. And I was like, okay, that's insulting, but whatever. And then, sure, could he have played better? He could have played a lot better. Could Houston have scored more points? Sure, could have scored a lot more points. Could Ed Oliver have been better? I don't know. He had 11 tackles as an interior defensive lineman. He played really well, right? But it was a big deal to ride all of that out because, right, you'd just lost Tom Herman. You had just lost Kelvin Sumlin. You just had lost you continue to lose these coaches and having to rebuild the whole thing and and you were jump starting what we thought was me at the time. I wasn't his biggest fan. I've been fans of coaches that did worse than Major Applewhite, so I don't mean to say that I'm like all knowing or anything, but you jumpstart the Major Applewhite saga era, whatever, with a win over a Power 5 school. And Arizona was not good, but it still felt good. It felt like, okay, Houston, as a smaller program, is able to compete with schools in the bottom half of these power conferences, even amidst all the change, right? Even amidst all the things happening. And that season kind of went awry at different points. 2017 was a weird year. We'll say weird. Weird's the word we want to use. Weird's the word we want to use there. But whatever the case may be, whatever word you want to use, I feel like we're kind of full circle here. Now, both Houston and Arizona are in the Power 4, so I don't mean to say that Houston's like punching up a class. They're not anymore. But Houston is only in their second year in the Power 4 conference, and B is undergoing their own major shift. Once again, it's the first season under Willie Fritz. Arizona's not good again. Probably has more like recruited talent in terms of 4s and 5 stars or whatever, right? I don't know if they have any 5 stars, I guess, but like they probably have more star talent on their team or whatever, if that were to matter, just like they would have imagined in 2017 as well. Side note, in the 2017 game, because I looked at the box score and the box score had a picture on it, they were all white and the helmet had the U of H logo, UH, the letters, but it was the state of Texas flag, I believe, in it. Can we bring that back? Can we just bring that back this week? That'd be dope. That'd be really, really cool. Anyway, all white with those helmets, super crisp. Houston has their eyes on a bowl game this year. In 2017, Houston had their eyes on taking the next step as a program. And I think the next step for this program, where we're building it up from, is going to be making that bowl game, right? Arizona feels like they're the team, for right or wrong, in the way of that each time. Houston at this point has, I would say, at least 2 winnable games left in Arizona on the road and Baylor at home to wear the Blues. Make sure you tickets on that one game time are super reasonable, by the way. And frankly, if I'm being honest, I think Houston can realistically play spoiler with BYU at the end of the season, right? There's a chance they can win all 3. BYU is certainly not there. BYU is unbeaten, but it's not unbeatable. Put it like that, right? And with that 3-game stretch here, Houston's just got to win 2 to get into a bowl. A bowl would be so big for the program at this point. I cannot stress how tremendous being a bowl team would be for year 1 of the Willie Fritz era. For the recruiting, for the practices, for the development, for the culture, for the money made, frankly, all of it, right? So all of that's on the line potentially this weekend. If you lose against Arizona, you're kind of putting your back up against the wall because, again, BYU is beatable, but they haven't been beaten, so that's a tough one. And then you've got to win the rivalry game with Baylor, right? Beat Arizona, things get a little bit more loose. You have a little more chances, and while I think you still beat Baylor, and I'm sure I'll talk myself into beating BYU by the time we get there, beating Arizona is a good way to set that up and kind of help hedge your bets some. And so I think that, interestingly enough, that like where are we in terms of a program moment in 2017 is repeating itself. We're like, okay, where are we? Are we bowl ready yet? Are we just fun, spunky upstart program, like rebuilding program? Like, where are we as a program? All of that is kind of figuring itself out based on this Arizona game. Now, 2017, I mean, almost argue we were wrong after the Arizona game if you were excited about that one. 2017 was again, we're using the word weird year. But on the whole, I think that it's interesting to see that Arizona is the opponent in both instances. And so we break them down in the present tense throughout the week. That's the history teacher in me, but I want to make sure we don't get too far away from where we were not so long ago. Anyway, tell me in the comments down below what you think. We're doing a book club episode later. We're going to preview Houston's basketball game against Louisiana tomorrow. All kinds of fun stuff here each and every day at Locked On Cougs. Make sure you subscribe, hit the bell so you know we're live. Locked On Cougs, the primary of the Locked On podcast network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.